Idaho Matters podcast is brought to you by St. Luke's On-Demand Virtual Care, which allows patients to see a provider from their home using a computer or smartphone with on-demand care for common ailments such as a cough, sore throat, or a sinus issue. More information at stluke'sonline.org.
Boise State Public Radio, because of you.
Well, I feel if you're listening to it even occasionally, you're reaping the benefits. And I think you really need to think about what the world would be like without public radio, without this very different format. Just think of what the world would be like without that. For me, it was a pretty clear-cut choice.
We do it because of you. Thank you for your support at boisestatepublicradio.org.
From the studios of Boise State Public Radio News, I'm Gemma Gaudette. This is Idaho Matters. When a wildland fire hits, it's all hands on deck to fight it. And Idaho has already created some unique partnerships to bring people and agencies together to respond to those fires. But there is always more to learn. Now everyone from the Bureau of Land Management, Extension Specialists, and the U.S. Wildland Fire Service will gather together at the Idaho Collaboration Summit 2026 Fire Knows No Boundaries to share what's worked, what hasn't worked when it comes to fighting fires, and then they will take home that information. The summit itself is a partnership between the Andrus Center for Public Policy at Boise State and the James A. and Louise McClure Center for Public Policy Research and the Rangeland Center at the University of Idaho. Dr. Catherine Himes is the director of the University of Idaho McClure Center, and she's been organizing the summit. She joins us now and brings with her Dr. Emily Wakefield, Cecil D. Andrus Endowed Chair for the Environment and Public Lands, Andrus Center for Public Policy, and panelist Tim Murphy. He is the retired Bureau of Land Management Idaho State Director and a current Idaho Fish and Game Commissioner Region 3 and former Director of Fire and Aviation at the National Interagency Fire Center. I want to welcome all three of you to the program today. Thank you so very much for taking time to join us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gemma.
Thank you, Gemma. It's good to join you all.
It's really nice of all of you to be here and talk about this really important topic. So, Catherine, let me begin with you. Can you tell us more about the summit and what you're hoping to have happen there?
Absolutely. The McClure Center has been keen to launch programming around collaboration for some time, and we are excited to have what will be an annual summit focused on collaboration with a different natural resources topic each year. So this first year, it's wildland fire. Perhaps next year, it's invasive species or water. But the idea is to bring people together from agencies far beyond industry. Maybe this year we also attract neighborhood associations, nonprofits, and we'll hear stories of what's been working well. What are these collaboration successes, as well as maybe some points where collaborations are stuck. So that's kind of the arc of the day and the motivation for having an event like this.
So I was just going to ask you that, Catherine. Can you talk a little bit more about why the McClure Center wanted to bring all of these folks together and do it in the format of a summit?
Yeah, that's a great question, Gemma. The McClure Center does 5 main things, and one of them is collaboration. We serve as neutral facilitators of collaboration, and for some time now, we've wanted to have training in collaboration to help Idaho build its collaboration capacity, specifically in natural resources. There's some great programs in Utah as well as in Wyoming, and we've been tracking these, and we thought, wouldn't it be wonderful to bring something like that to Idaho? So we thought a single day event would be an excellent way to bring many people together on the panelist side as well as the audience side, and to have this deep dive into collaboration. Again, those success stories, maybe points where collaborations are stuck, stories of collaborations that have sunsetted, have ample time for people to talk with each other, and then to have some great partners. This first year, we're thrilled to be working with the Andrus Center and with the Rangeland Center.
So, Emily, talk to us about the Andrus Center and why it was important for your organization to participate in this event.
Absolutely. So, as many Idahoans know, Cecil Andrus is the state's only four-time governor, and he was elected on what became an environmental campaign and is really well known for the work that he's done in a bipartisan fashion around the environment. So, it makes good sense that Senator Jim McClure's legacy and Governor Cecil Andrus's legacy is one that values compromise and common sense. And the Andrus Center just celebrated its 30th year at Boise State, and we have a new home. We're now within Boise State's new School of the Environment. And in that new home, we have greater access to sort of the foundation of advancing new knowledge and also doing the work that we've done for a long time of community engagement on pressing environmental issues. And so the Andrus Center does a annual conference, usually on a topic where we think there's progress to be made. And there are a few spaces that are more collaborative right now than wildland fire. It's a bipartisan issue where people are coming together in coalitions and collaboratives and partnerships and alliances, looking for long-term solutions to some of the big dilemmas of wildland fire. So it makes great sense to partner with the Rangeland Center and the McClure Center to have this conversation.
So, Catherine, both you and Emily have now mentioned the Rangeland Center. For folks who aren't familiar, can you tell us what the Rangeland Center is?
Yes, I'd be delighted to do so. The Rangeland Center is actually in the field doing some work today, which is why they couldn't join this conversation. The Rangeland Center is part of the University of Idaho. They have people in Moscow as well as in Boise and some folks who are over at Rinker Rock Creek Ranch. But their focus is to leverage sciences to develop long-term solutions for rangeland management. Their mission is to create knowledge and foster understanding for the stewardship and management of rangelands. Each year, the McClure Center and the Rangeland Center partner on a different event that takes place in the fall, the Rangeland Fall Forum. And we travel to different parts of the state, and depending on where we are located, there's a theme that is very place specific. And it's been a delight of ours to partner with the Rangeland Center for almost 10 years on that. And so this was a natural extension of that partnership.
Tim, let me bring you into the conversation. You have quite the history with public lands, with fire. So I want to start with some basics if we could, because, I think we hear terms, especially during fire season, forest fire, wildfire, rangeland fire, BLM land, state land. Can we just kind of start with maybe you explaining, differences and similarities to what we're talking about today? And can we kind of start with those terms around fire?
Oh, sure, Jim. Thank you. Regarding whether it's a forest fire or rangeland fire, that simply, talks to the type of fuels that are available. And rangeland fires can go big and fast. And forest fires, of course, have heavier fuels and can go longer. So that's the basics there. I want to say that, across Idaho, particularly in wildland fire, the word neighbor is a verb. And rangeland fire protection associations are a great example. And that's where I have my most experience are in rangelands and not in the high mountain fuel types. So, a lightning strike and a fire in a remote area was most often seen by a ranch or a farm in central and southern Idaho. They'd call it in, and at the same time, they'd respond. It's in their backyard. Forest Service or BLM would arrive, an engine perhaps, and let them know they're not credentialed and they had to leave. Well, how do you think that taffy pole went over? Was really received as quite provincial by the folks who lived in the local area. Climate change was digging in, early 2000s. Fires were getting harder to contain, and there was a better way. We were not utilizing all the resources available. So about 2010, ranches, BLM, IDL, Idaho Department of Lands, came together to discuss how we can incorporate private individuals into incident command system response. Governor Otter was a huge supporter, along with IDL and BLM. Governor Little carried on when he came in as governor. House Bill 93 passed in, I think it was 2013. And that allowed rangeland fire protection associations to form and operate and respond to Idaho fires. These are private concerns. This is a ranch, they're ranch hands, their families that agree to go to training just like the feds, just like IDL state, and get the same credentials. So we have now have a force multiplier. We have more people, and particularly more people to respond close to where there are strikes very far from any BLM or any Forest Service operation. BLM provided firefighter training, excess equipment, and radio frequencies. The state of Idaho, IDL, provided funding to assist RFPAs starting up with legal support to form their nonprofit. And IDL also provided equipment and so forth. So we went from ranchers responding and people trying to chase them off a fire. And that response, by local ranches had been going on since hell was a campfire. So trying to ask people to leave just was a non-starter. So RFPAs were just the right recipe. These are members living day to day in locations up to hours from federal and state response. And they feel the need for safe, aggressive, rapid, effective suppression response. And by the way, Gemma, these folks know the area better than most. They live there. They live and work there. They know the local fire behavior. They know the location of water sources. They know roads, including roads that are on a firefighter's map that are impossible to pass now because of last week's storm, or it all rolls up to crucial intel. And finally, results in more fires being contained at fewer acres. Ask a federal fire management officer with an RFPA, Rangeland Fire Protection Association, situated in their response area. And I can guarantee you they'll tell you RFPAs without a question are one of the best resources that they have available. And that resource didn't exist for decades. It's just been a huge improvement in Idaho. They'll conduct rapid initial size up on a fire and they'll call dispatch and say, we think we can pick this up and we'll let you know every few minutes where we're at. That's huge because that dispatcher may be short on resources. They know they can hold back resources for other priorities while an RFPA takes care of business. Or they can request precise resources because they feel that fire is going to go big. And then have the right resources in place to keep it at the smallest acreage possible. A day with multiple fire starts, you can imagine a dispatcher that's running low on resources handy, having those RFPAs out there, particularly when they call in and say, we'll get this picked up in the next burning period. That's just huge. And then I'll end saying, from the first RFPAs, Mountain Home, Black Canyon, let me think, Wahi, Sailor Creek, and Three Creek. There's now 10 across central and southern Idaho, Weiser River being the newest, protecting 9.3 million acres of private, state, and federal land. When I looked at that this morning, that's larger than the state of New Jersey. And these are areas that are so remote, it could take an hour or hours for federal and state resources to get there. And not to mention, there's someone right there on scene sizing it up for dispatch, so everyone knows what's needed and what's happening. They've been highly successful at protecting range pastures, wildland fire habitat from sage grouse to mule deer winter range, watersheds, cultural sites, range infrastructure from fences to water development. So I can't think of a better example than RFPAs in the state of Idaho, where the word neighbor is being used as a verb.
So, Tim, when we're talking about these rangeland fire protection associations, how important is it that these collaborative efforts, though, are set up, that these relationships are formed, before a fire ever starts? Because as you said, in the past, these folks come, they're like, we can take care of it, and then they get pushed out of the way. But, now there's a collaboration that I would assume contains fires a lot quicker.
Yes, fires are being picked up quicker and at smaller acreage. I don't know my stats. I've been retired for a while, but at one point it was 95, 97% initial attack success, meaning that fire was contained in the first 24 hours. So to go from, let's say, 97 to 97.5, that's going to take a lot. But I can tell you that more fires are being contained at smaller acres and particularly in very remote areas. And again, allowing federal and state resources to be available for other areas. This is huge. We all in Idaho have been addressing and concerned with preserving and conserving sage-grouse habitat, mule deer winter range. Same areas that I'm addressing are being protected better at this point. Meetings happen in the winter. In fact, I'm going to attend a meeting with the new Weiser River RFPA in a week or two, just to hear how the collaboration's been going since my time. And it appears that it's going well. They're meeting before the season kicks off, not only to trade frequencies and resources and to get the training and the refresher, but to renew relationships. Relationships are everything, whether it's conducting a business downtown or in a high-risk environment on the fire ground.
So, Catherine, you were recently named a 2025 Fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science for your science diplomacy and your state policy development. So, first off, congratulations on that. But second, can you talk to us about how this upcoming summit fits into what you're doing in order to find these types of collaborations?
Yeah, so I thanks so much, Gemma, for the note of congratulations. That's really kind of you. The McClure Center has worked with a lot of different groups across the state. Some of these are focused on natural resources challenges like how to share land and recreate together. Some of them are focused on how do we respond to something that's coming from Washington, D.C., that's going to potentially change how land is managed. And how do we, as people in the state who have, as Tim was describing, a really deep understanding of the land, how might we want to manage that land in a different way? And how could we have a proposal that we bring to the federal government, for example? And as we've had those interactions with collaboration, some of which we've facilitated and some others have facilitated and some have sunsetted, it's really clear that having some more tools, if you will, more ways of understanding how to collaborate would be really helpful. And it doesn't matter the natural resources topic. As I mentioned earlier, there are programs in Wyoming and Utah that have been building collaboration capacity in natural resources in those states for some time. In Wyoming, for instance, it's been over a decade, and they have an annual event, kind of like this, with a particular theme. And they also have a cohort model, usually about 15 to 20 professionals from industry, nonprofits, local, state, federal, tribal agencies, community leaders in this cohort meeting together for almost a year, going to different parts of Wyoming, seeing examples of collaborations that are working well, seeing examples of collaborations that are maybe stuck, maybe haven't met for some time, and understanding what are the ingredients that make collaborations sing, if you will. Why do they get stuck? What are ways to get unstuck? And we heard time and time again, my colleagues and I, as we engaged with the Wyoming program, that now, with so many leaders in Wyoming having gone through this program, participated in one of the annual summits, when you have just a few people in the room who are familiar with these fundamentals around collaboration, how to support a colleague who is asked to maybe lead 8 sage-grouse collaboratives, for example, the tone changes. It's like people almost soften. Instead of saying, well, this is the thing I want to do, this is the thing I want to protect, it shifts to how can we work together? I want to find common ground with you. I want to move forward. Like you asked Tim, what about this time outside of the fire season? How important is it to work on these relationships before there's a fire, before there's a crisis? It's so important because then when you walk in the room, the tone is different. And I think that tone is really important in a sticky natural resources challenge.
So, Tim, I'm curious about what you are hoping that folks take away from the summit, but also in your opinion, why is a summit like this so important?
Well, Gemma, thanks. At a practical, what's going to happen next is I would hope that additional people would hear this, ask questions, and additional rangeland fire protection associations would come forward and be implemented and stand up. We can go from 9 million acres to many, many more. And I already went over the efficiencies, the effectiveness, and the safety. So that would be very nice, and I think that's possible. There are many areas that have asked about how do we get qualified for RFPA, and that's going to result in more effective firefighting and chipping away at that initial attack success, making it better. Um, and then across the board, people understanding that collaboration is really not something that other people try. It's fundamental today. There's just not enough of us around to tackle all the issues on the ground, on the landscape, whether it's working landscapes, wilderness areas. Think of the Hawaii Initiative some years ago, where the feds and the Wilderness Society and ranchers and the Shoshone Paiute tribe got together and did what folks thought was impossible. Yes, individually it would have been impossible. Together with Senator Crapo, we have a huge, beautiful wilderness area protecting not only land, landscapes, animals, plants, but protecting ways of life from ranching to tribal cultural practices. So anytime there can be a conference like this to show how collaboration works, yes, in this case, fire, but I believe it opens the book to people thinking we can collaborate on 4 or 5 or 7 other challenges in Idaho.
And Tim, you
Gemma,
mentioned oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Gemma, this is Emily, and I wanted to offer another reason to amplify what Catherine and Tim have said as to why a summit like this is important right now. And that's the larger context at the federal level, where there are a lot of changes happening. So, a newly established agency, the U.S. Wildland Fire Service, is being stood up this year, and it's emerged in the Department of the Interior and been tasked with unifying and modernizing federal land fire management. And the summit will have the inaugural director of this U.S. Wildland Fire Service, Chief Brian Fennessy, give a keynote address at the conference. So, in addition to thinking about collaboration and honing their individual skills in a community space, the participants will be able to learn on the front lines with the changes that are happening at the federal level and think about what some of those changes might mean for themselves and their communities, whether they live in Harris Ranch or Avamore or anywhere along the front from Mountain Home to Weiser. There are reasons why changes at the federal level impact cities and counties and municipalities when it comes to something like wildland fire.
And Emily, how important, in your opinion, is it that you take this collective wisdom, right, from all of these collaborators in the room at this summit when you have an audience from the federal government? Because sometimes, even though they may be in the federal government, Idaho is different in some ways, right? We have so much public land. If you are from the East Coast, sometimes that doesn't necessarily translate into a true, full understanding. So, how important is it, to have these folks all in the room together, if that makes sense?
It's tremendously important, and that's why we see this as such a welcoming opportunity for people who are new to fire or who work with fire every day, and to be in the same room considering the approaches and the strategies and the tools that can be applied in different communities and different contexts, I think is a learning opportunity, and it's a really great strategy for dealing with some of the uncertainty that comes with these big changes. And Gemma, you mentioned that Idaho has a lot of federal public land. Almost 2/3 of the state is in BLM or Forest Service land. And many Idahoans view that as a benefit. But when something as risky as wildland fire happens nearby, they need to understand the ways the government is primed to respond and the ways individuals like rangeland fire protection associations are collaborating with those agencies in order to respond as well.
And Tim, let's talk a little bit more about that, because these rangeland fire protection associations, when you talk about wisdom, it would seem that there's a lot of wisdom that folks maybe in the federal government, in other agencies, can learn from these collaborations? Because as you mentioned, so many of these folks in these associations have lived on this land for generations.
Yes, and Gemma, one of the panel members, Mike Gary, who was one of the original RFPA initiatives, he'll be on the panel. He'll be speaking with Brian Fennessy, the new chief of the National Fire Service, the new one that's standing up, that Emily spoke to. And I'm looking forward to that because Brian has deep fire background, primarily though out of Orange County. There are no RFPAs in California. And you mentioned we have some differences in Idaho. We're small. We can get thinned out pretty quick in the way of resources. So RFPAs in Idaho are essential. And I'm looking forward to Brian taking in what Mike Gary has to say about his role on federal lands, private as well, state, to contain fires at the smallest level, and why people who live on the land are so important to success. Again, I don't want to repeat myself, but they know how fires behave in their backyard. They've seen it for generations, where water is and where it's not, and where roads are and where they're not. Federal firefighters may be coming in during a big fire bust. The engine rolling on Mike Gary's area may indeed, or the strike team of engines may be coming from New Mexico. In no way could they know the landscape, how to get around. So this is an essential partnership, not only before the fire and planning, but on the fire ground when there are ignitions rolling, and everyone succeeds. No engine operator wants to look on a map, see water, and find a dry hole. Mike Gary and his partners on that RFPA are going to be able to guide them for success.
And Tim, you mentioned California and the differences and how they don't have these RFPs. However, is there a way to potentially share that wisdom, right, of what Idaho has been able to do with these associations? And is it something that, maybe could make a difference in other states at some point?
It absolutely would make a difference in other states, and collaborative gatherings, as the Andrus Center and the McClure Center are providing for us, is just a huge way to get that done. There will be people from all over the West. I've already heard of some firefighters coming from other states, and it'll get passed along. You need a success in order to articulate that it works, right? Early on in the 2000s, people said, there is no way we're going to get ranches and farmers out here with successful firefighting. And now, as I said earlier, if you ask a federal fire management officer in central and southern Idaho, they're going to tell you the RFPAs are indispensable. So yes, it will enhance operations in other states across the West.
So, Catherine, talk to us a little bit more about the summit. I mentioned it's April 22nd, but where is it? Who can come? Who will be there?
Great questions, Gemma. I'm happy to share more. So this is open to anyone. I think as Tim indicated, that we certainly will have participation from agency folks, local, state, federal, and tribal. We know that industry will be coming to this and some nonprofit organizations. We've been in conversation with neighborhood associations and some different groups around, I would say, the broader Treasure Valley that engage in one way or another with wildfire. It could be on the mitigation side, it could be what happens post-fire. And there also are students who will be attending this, and we're so excited to be engaging with the next generation. But as we've talked today, wildland fire is a topic that is, I think, of great interest to Idahoans. And this idea of learning more about collaboration in natural resources and how to collaborate and how neighbor is a verb, that's also of interest to Idahoans. So it's really open to anyone, and we hope to see lots of people who are sort of far beyond wildland fire, so to speak, at this event. You mentioned that the event is April 22nd. It's from 9 to 5. It's at the Stuckel Sky Center, which is on the Boise State University campus. It's $90 to attend for the full day, but there are options to attend for part of the day. I also want to answer the final part of your question, which is What else will we share during this day? We'll have an opening either from our governor or our lieutenant governor, and they'll be talking about what's been happening in Idaho. There was a report a couple of years ago, a major wildland fire report that involved a lot of agencies, so they'll touch on where we are. We'll also be hearing from Dustin Miller, who's the director of the Idaho Department of Lands. That's our state agency, really responsible for a lot with wildland fire. Our first big panel is landscape level partnerships, and that's where RFPAs come in. That will be Mike Gary, as Tim mentioned, Tim, hearing from Tim about RFPAs. And then we have two others who will be talking about other collaborations. One is the Idaho Forest Restoration Partnership. Another one is the Southwest Idaho All Lands Partnership. Emily mentioned the remarks that we'll hear from the new head, the new director of the new U.S. Department of the Interior Wildland Fire Service, Brian Fennessy. We will have some tools, some strategies, some goodies, if you will, around collaboration, how you put collaboration into action. And we'll hear from Idaho practitioners who do this full time for a living, who work with natural resources, professionals, and communities on collaboration. And then our final big panel is strategies and tools, collaboration approaches at the community level. And we'll hear from the Greater Yellowstone Fire Action Network. We'll hear from Valley County, so that's where Tim lives, near McCall. And this is the wildfire mitigation director. And we'll also be hearing what's happening around the Burns area of Oregon. And we'll hear from Oregon State University Extension specialist, a rangeland fire specialist. And that's really the arc of the day with lots of intentional networking and other things built in.
Well, I want to thank all of you so much for taking time to talk with us today. We've been speaking with Dr. Catherine Himes, director of the James A. and Louise McClure Center for Public Policy Research, Dr. Emily Wakehill, Cecil D. Andrus Endowed Chair for the Environment and Public Lands at the Andrus Center for Public Policy, and panelist Tim Murphy, retired Bureau of Land Management Idaho State Director and a current Region 3 Idaho Fish and Game Commissioner and former Director of Fire and Aviation at the National Interagency Fire Center. We've been discussing this year's Collaboration Summit 2026, Fire Knows No Boundaries, which will happen on April 22nd in Boise. You've been listening to the Idaho Matters podcast from Boise State Public Radio. To stay in touch, you can find quick Idaho daily news every morning when you subscribe to the Connector podcast. Just by listening, you're helping to support public radio right here in Idaho. And I want to say a big thank you for that.
Hey, podcast listener, quick question, since you are probably, most likely, on your phone right now. Do you use the Nextdoor app? Because if you do, Boise State Public Radio is now on there too, sharing our trusted local news and Idaho stories right in your neighborhood feed. So the same place you check in on your community can now keep you informed. Just open the Nextdoor app, search Boise State Public Radio, and tap follow.